First of all, thank you for coming out to listen to me gibber away this evening, and thank you for inviting me to Sackville. It's really nice to be here, and I was really thrilled to get the invitation. And so we'll start with this etching. This is a piece of student work from 1979, and I did a series of etchings that were spoofs on advertising, and I began to think of a product a doggy might need if it was scared of taking a bath. So this is the bath time doggy massage. Okay, and I was also thinking that we have a dog store in Toronto. I don't know whether it's national, and they have this ad campaign. Like, they have all this stuff for your dog, like organic doggy food and like toys to up its IQ and all that stuff. And the byline of the ad is, "You and your pet better together," right? And I listened to this ad first thing in the morning and I'm going, this is totally friggin' warped. Like, what is it with your pet? You know, so now what happened, and this is really an important story because it affected my whole working method forever, for the rest of this life. Shortly after this series, and at about this point in the series, I thought I was like a total fucking genius, right? It's like, genius, 22-year-old art student, right? It's like, oh man, you won't have any trouble getting a show. You're just so good. You're so good. And then the drawing started to go to rat shit. Every drawing I did was bad. I wasn't making a line, I was dragging a corpse, right? So I'm sitting there, and I'm freaking out. I'm going, oh my God, it's over. You're 22, and your best work is behind you. My favorite teacher, Jim Cridlin, he was a fabulous, fabulous foundation year teacher, kept on saying in foundation year, "Julie, you're going to burn out." I thought, this is it. You've burned out. It's over. So there was a moment where I was lucid and all this ego flip out. And a friend had invited me to make party decorations for her 21st birthday. And I loved doing it. And I thought, when was the last time you had fun making a piece of art? And I thought, it was when you made the party decorations. So, is this going to work? Yay! Okay, so I thought, okay, make party decorations. For an entire year, I took all art vocabulary out of the process. I was not making sculpture. I was making party decorations. I was not making images. No, no, no. I was making pictures, right? So, and what this did is it freed me up from the presumption that everything I was going to make was going to have people slobbering in their laps 200 years from now. Okay, no, seriously, something had to be done about that. So I actually started getting furniture and assembling them into things and painting them with enamel. And then a bit through this, I thought, wouldn't it be lovely if people could wear hats and determine their scenery? So I made a series of these hats. This is 1979 still. And this was balsa wood that I soaked and I bent, right? And I managed to glue it together, clamping it with clothes pegs. I don't know how the hell I did it, honestly. This was rice paper that was coated in acrylic medium and then painted. And this is my brother Michael, a chemical engineer who was always a really good sport about modeling these things. I also took at the Ontario College of Art a lot of printmaking. I fell in love with printmaking at about 18. I was taking a figure drawing class, and the model was on break. And I, walked over to the print room, and the whole class was in process. The presses were going, the paper was all being peeled off. And it was literally, yes, that, now, right? It was like I saw some really cute guy across the room at a party and wanted to date him immediately, right? So I ended up doing a lot of printmaking at the Ontario College of Art. I went from intaglio to screen printing because screen printing was the only course I could get as a first-year student. Totally hated it, almost dropped out. Then took litho and went back to intaglio. So This is my print I did just before I graduated. This thing is about the width of a record cover, okay? But a little bit higher. Okay, just a second. Record cover? Sorry, you guys. Not including the tassel. It's like this, okay? And then it's about like this. So this is my kitchen wallpaper on Parliament Street. Our kitchen had to be upstairs because the kitchen downstairs was condemned by the gas company. And so this is photo etching, and this is aquatint printed God knows how many times over. I lost count of the colors in this thing, and then I made the tassel. And then I graduated into the abyss. Now, what Toronto was like at the time was there were parallel galleries, but they were really, really hard to get into. There weren't a lot of places that were interested in taking emerging artists. So I started my career on totally alternative stuff. So this shop was called Toxic Plan 9. And it was run by this woman from Philadelphia who called me Kitten. Hey, it was everything's fine here. So this is, these are Kleenex pom-poms that have been coated with gold paint, lacquer-based. This work only exists in this photograph now because it's rotting somewhere. And this is styrofoam with flocking. And that's me doing my own documentation. And I got a Canada Council grant for this, actually. Not for this project, for this work. And I was really, really pumped up about that. So I started to try making these giant sculptures. And I ended up making a sculpture 1 story high, but I didn't get the engineering. So we put it up on Queen Street, and the whole thing fell apart. It really, really didn't work. So after that, whoops, come on. There it is. I decided to make dolls. Now, this is in 1981. And so, okay, I'm a year out of art school. I'm making these dolls. All my friends are telling me they're really great. I think they're genius. They're subversive. They're a little bit psycho. I'm taking them around to galleries, and no one will take them. And I came down thinking, God, they just don't get it. Like, how can they possibly not give me a one-person show with catalog for this kind of work, right? Now, how? They must be out of their minds. So I had one friend, I had lots of friends. No, I had one particular friend, and her name is Lorna Mills. Okay, I met Lorna Mills when I was 18 and she was 16, and we were at the Banff Center, at which point the Banff Center ran 6-week art courses, and this was in the 70s. Here is Lorna, 16 years old, doing 10-foot abstract acrylics. Like, I swear to God. And she's a voracious reader, and Lorna wasn't saying anything about these dolls. Nothing. So I finally got up some nerve, and I said, Lorna, what do you think of my dolls? She immediately took me across the street to the paddock, bought me a shot of whiskey, sat me down, and said, if anyone else did those dolls, I would like them. But you, she looked at me, she said, they're below your standard. I immediately stopped making the dolls. And you know, it's like I can get rejection slips. You know, you go through your 24-hour bitch down rejection time. I can do all of that. But I have a group of artists, and if they don't like what I'm doing, I'm devastated. You know, it's like National Gallery, fine, keep on saying no to me. But Lorna Mills, it's like, not Lorna. And I have... No, but I think it's important. I mean, those are the people that keep you competing with yourself. You know, like so Lorna got me out of this phase, and I went right back to what I always go back to printmaking if I want to sort of re-gear my head. So at the time, I could slut my way into the print shop at the Ontario College of Art. Fred Hagen let me back in. Oh, I was terrible just after for 2 years after graduation, right? Because they didn't have any rules about insurance. I slutted my way into the dark rooms, into the print shop. Even as right into 1985 when I was living in a studio with no, well, I had a sink and a toilet down the hall. I would go into there was a place under the auditorium at the Ontario College of Art, and I'd take my showers there. Like, I just juiced that school. I really, and then the rules came in about insurance, and it was over. I'd still be juicing it if I could. Right? So this is from 1982, and it's called Pockmark, and it's just this based on a photograph of a teapot with a cozy on it. What I really liked about photo etching is this realization that this is all pre-digital, so you could actually take a photograph and it felt like you could sculpt it. You know, because the photograph is turned into a relief sculpture, and then you could sculpt it. Now, to save money, I would use the back of my etching plates. At the time, this little solution called KPR Resist was what you put on copper plates to do photo etching, okay? And KPR Resist was banned because they found it caused defects in babies with pregnant women. But at the Ontario College of Art, I used to atomize this stuff onto plates with no mask. It's amazing I have a brain. And no, I'm serious, man. It's like, I mean, you would be like, you know, pumping that KPR Resist, and then you would be doing the dye with the atomizer, sucking it all in. Now, what I did was I used the back, I used the back of this etching plate for another etching, and I thought, isn't this fabulous? You can do two etchings simultaneously. So I thought, this will, you know, up production, save time. So now what happened is all these marks here are there's some shellac I put on the back of the plate, but the acid ate through the shellac, right? And then this black is another plate that I put on top. So let's see what's next. Oh, I took up abstract painting. I took up abstract painting because I thought it would be hard. Okay, and it is hard. I find abstraction harder than hell. Abstraction and observational drawing. Those things, I find them hard to do. I started using house paint on paper. You'll see that soon enough. Just because it was cheap, you know? I thought, okay, you're going to spend a lot of time screwing things up. So if you just use house paint on paper, it won't cost you a lot of money to screw things up. As a result, I would say maybe 5 pieces from this series exist, and everything else is gone. This slideshow is my retrospective, by the way. I thought of that too. One of the things that's great about this profession is we have these systems we interact with. We have something, you know, we have the gallery system, and what you can actually do is you have the option to mess with the system a little bit, right? So I thought, okay, because you know, you get to a point you've been working for 25 years, and people will come up and they'll say, hey, someone should give you a survey show, right? And it's really sweet, and it means they like your work, and I'm thinking, you know, no one's going to give me a survey show. So I thought, fuck that, I'll make my own. And this is a survey show you can carry in your purse. The administrative overhead is next to nothing, right? And if you add up all the slide lectures you give, a lot of people come to see the show. So again, if you think alternatively, then you can start to have a good time with this profession. Now, the Eye Review, this is from 1983. The Eye Review was a little alternative group. It consisted of Chris Chowder, Oliver Kellhammer, and Denny Didit. And they were in a section of Toronto that was basically, in gallery sense, Nowheresville in 1983. Now, the venuing depended on whether Denny and Oliver, because they were living in this storefront, were into living in the basement. living in a 6 by 6 foot square area at the back of the place, or just wanting to take over the whole first floor. In this case, they wanted to take over the whole first floor. So they curated the front of the building. And this was the first experience putting something together in public, because in galleries and at openings, everybody's very polite to you, right? Because nobody wants, you don't want to crush somebody's ego. You can't go up to them at an opening, and you've got to buy them a drink. But at an opening, you go out and you say, you know what? I just want to say that your work is really, really dull and pedestrian and has the IQ level of a peanut, and you can't say that to someone at an opening. It's really terrible. But when you're doing stuff in the street like this, people can say anything they want to you. So it's a really good, I love it. It's such a good lesson. So I was doing this and someone came out and said, hey, I like the other window better. So it was totally straightforward. It was so great. And then these guys were hanging out of the liquor store, and they liked the window. And the Eye Review was wonderful. They also took over 2 showcases in Union Station, and we're going to come to what I did for that, and there's a story to that. Now, at the time I was starting to do the abstract paintings, I went back to doing some printing, and I was working out of a studio at the time. And so I did lino cuts, and these are all hand burnished. This one, and again, we're talking baby work here. We're talking, this high for this print. And this was when I was, for years and years and years with printmaking, I was doing the endless color print, right? I just kept on, this I reduced literally till there was nothing left. And it turned into a form of pointillism. And this is one of the paintings with house paint on paper. It's about 6 feet across. And these things were like porcelain because I had more paint than paper. And the paper I used was something called June Drutz paper, because June Drutz, a drawing teacher, would order it for her class. So, this whole thing was a total archival nightmare, okay? So the paper was not rag, it was pulp. I would put pieces of this paper together using the house paint. Then I would, and all of these edges were I had holes in the edges because I would use thumbtacks to put it on the wall. And this was in my first one-person show out of art school at Garnett Press. And I was putting all the frames together, and I made these scaffolds, and my carpentry is really bad. And I got pieces of plexiglass, and I put holes in the plexiglass every inch. So every inch for 6 feet, it was riveted with bolts. And then I decided to try making homemade frames, and I didn't miter the corners very well on some of them, and they wouldn't join. So I just stuffed the corners at the top with pieces of cloth and tipped them with pink paint so the pictures had ears. Now what happened was there was a review, and they reviewed the framing. They reviewed the work too, but they reviewed the framing. Now, in 1983, there was this thing in an old Heritage store on Bloor Street called Chroma Living. It was organized by Carla Garnett, Tim Joslin, and Andy Fabo. And it was this wonderful inclusive show that had painting, it had furniture, it had installation, there was a fashion show. There was probably about 100 artists in this show, and they all took over this department store. And it was wonderful because there was artists who were established within the city, but there was a whole bunch of us emerging artists, and to get invited into this thing was so wonderful. And so I decided to put together furniture that resembled my paintings. As you can see, the absolutely fine craftsmanship here, all the bolts, the found chair, cloth wrapped around the cut shapes. I cut these out of particle board or something. And And this is the back, and the highly professional staging of the documentation. Yes, and these were my bed sheets. So, and that was from about 83. And this is my studio shot from 84. I mounted these pieces on the wall and just took a little wall shot. This would have been about 9 feet. These are guesstimation memory things, but it was about 9 feet. And which ones do I still have? Oh yeah, I still have this one, and I still have this one, and I still have this one, and the rest of them no longer exist. And this is something called tip spine. This is from about 84 too. And that thing's about 5 feet high. And again, the abstraction was great because I found it really, really challenging. And I found it challenging because you keep on asking yourself, what's the difference between something that's abstract and something that's decorative? And I kept on saying to myself, do these pieces have an internal logic? That somehow or another, I believe they still had to have some kind of content. And this one, oh, hey, I was still doing lino cuts. This one got really simple. You're going to find in this whole presentation, I always go back to printmaking. I've decided, and the more I work, you're going to see that I'm not really an artist. I'm really a designer pretending to be an artist. I'm coming to that conclusion more and more and more, which is fine. I'm cool with that. And this is called Snowflake 69. This does exist because I did it on BFK paper as opposed to really nasty-ass paper. And it's called Snowflake 69 because it reminds me of colors I did, all the colors I was seeing in 1969. So now this is something from 85, and this is the eye review when they took over the showcases. They had a showcase in the west entrance to Union Station in Toronto and a showcase in the east entrance. And I thought it would be really nice to just do some nice flowers because I kept on thinking people are going through this. They're not going to have a lot of time to look at something and to contemplate it. So I thought, okay, make something that will accommodate a situation where people are going to be going through. They might give this thing 30 seconds at best. Also, what is really fun to do is if I'm doing abstract work, I periodically like to venture into figurative work. Now, the backgrounds, each one of these boards is 18 by 24. The backgrounds are sort of done in house paint and pigments, and the flowers are done on alkyd paint. So what I would do is I'd do the backgrounds, and then buy fresh flowers each day and put them in a little glass and copy them, paint them on. So that's a close-up of a couple of them. And the sort of little easels I built for them, somebody looked at those in construction and very kindly said that I was doing naive carpentry. Honestly, it's like everything was held up by all these rivets. If you have to put in too many screws, you can't do carpentry. I think that's the bottom line. Also in 85, I thought I'd do little table sculptures. So this thing is about 13 inches long, and when I was 16, I was at the Unitarian Church had a youth group called LRY, and so I was at the youth camp in the 70s, and I taught arts and crafts, so I learned how to basket weave. And do you want to hear a diva story? Yeah? You want to hear it? Okay. These things were being photographed in Toronto Life. Okay? Now the photographer said, how would you like to do this? And I said, can you just get a table and we'll put them on the table because they're table sculptures, right? And he said, okay. I walk into the shoot and he's arranged plinths with each one of these on top of a plinth with all this friggin' tooling around the plinth, right? And okay, I mean, here we are, emerging artist, right? And you get this media opportunity, and what do? You take each sculpture off the plinth. You tell the photographer you are not going to have your sculptures represented in this manner, and you walk out of the shoot. That's what you do. No, and so the photographer came after me, and he said, okay, let's talk. And I said, listen, you know, I really can't do this. And he said, okay, you want the tables? I'll give you the table. And I said, thank you. And then I said, you know what? I said, you're okay. And he looked at me and he said, you know what? He said, you're okay for an asshole. So I put my hand out and I said, let's shake. And then the photo shoot went on. So there's your little diva story. Now, this is a puppet. I like making toys. You know what's going to happen when I'm really old? I'm going to probably have a little workshop and make toys and send them to children all over the world. I think that's what's... And I like doing beading and embroidery. I periodically have to bead and embroider, so I did all this beading here. And this is a finger puppet, so we're talking maybe 4 inches high, okay? So that's my little foray into toys. And there'll be more toys coming. And then in 1985, I went to Mexico. I was in Mexico for a month. It was the first time I'd ever been anywhere where English was not spoken, other than Quebec. And my dealer, Carla Garnett, at the time said, I can't wait to see what happens to the color in your work when you get back. Now, when I was there, I kept these little 5x7 sketchbooks, and I would just do a little gouache painting in them every day. I tried taking photographs, and I guess because I don't have the sensitivity with the medium, I never felt like I was organizing my reactions around all the new stuff I was seeing, but I found if I put stuff into sketchbooks, it made sense of all these new things I was seeing. And this is candies. They have these great candies. They're limes, and they're emptied out and stuffed with coconut and sugared, and they're really, really good. So I get back to Toronto, and all the color disappears from my work. And these are silver point on house paint that have had like pigment put in the house paint. Just after art school, I was working at the supply store at OCA, and they were selling sticks of silver for silver point. So I thought, wouldn't it be fun to, instead of doing very detailed, realistic drawings, to actually do abstracts in silver point? So I set about doing abstracts. And here's another one. This is still 85. And this is one from 86. And here's a banana, just for the hell of it. I couldn't resist doing a realistic picture of a banana in silver point. Now, this is from 86, and what I would do is I would prime the paper in house paint. Then I would start drawing with the silver point. Then if I didn't like something, I would simply put house paint over it. So you can see ghosts coming up through this. We got to go back. Sorry. Do you want to hear the story of the show with this? Yeah. Okay. Garnett Press was 2 stories. It was a Victorian house that had been renovated. And what I did to frame things for this show was I got frames from the Salvation Army and painted them white. I made some of my own frames, and the corners were improved at this point. I didn't have to make ears. And then I laminated the mats in Japanese paper using wallpaper paste. So I was like framing for 6 months. So I put all the work up, 2 floors at Garnett Press, and it looks like there's nothing on the wall. Like the show is opening in 2 days, and it's like, oh my God, there's no show. So I got a bottle of wine, and I sat in the gallery. And I sat in the gallery with the work, and it was nice because Carla Garnett let us in overnight and stuff, so that's what I did. I just drank wine and sat there till I looked around and thought, okay, it's subtle, there is a show on the wall. But that was terrifying. I thought, oh my God, you've produced nothing. Look at that, it's evaporated. I decided to go back to printmaking, more printmaking. So January 1st of 1987, I went into Open Studio and I started working on new photo etchings. Now, it took 6 months for me to get something that did not look like everything up to that 6-month period. I wouldn't feed any pet for breakfast anywhere, okay? So the first thing is Open Studio had a darkroom at the time. So for the first 2 months, I did nothing but develop photographs I'd taken. I'm not very good at developing photographs. And then doing contact print collages so I would get an idea how the light worked, because I'd get an idea of how things would start to look when I transferred them onto an etching plate. And then I did, for 4 months, all sorts of really bad etchings. And then I got Fun Float. And again, it's a combination of photo etching. There's another plate, so these little things were printed on top. This and this is aloe-poupée wiping, and the idea that I could use the acid and the scraping and the color to take the photograph and sculpt it. And that's what it really and truly felt like. And that's why I really like the photo etching. This thing, I did something, how many people have done photo etching in here? Okay, you know how the etch is really shallow and you can actually scrape it off and burnish it? It's really good because you can use it as a reduction method. So this area, I started printing in yellow and then I scraped it and burnished it and then printed in a darker color. And I kept on doing these things. This is called Rupert the Bear. Well, you know, who has read Rupert the Bear? Okay. For all of you people who haven't, Rupert's a bear. and he gets to go off all by himself, right? There was all these stories about either young children or young animals who could talk and wear clothing, who could go off by themselves. And Rupert and his friends would discover, like, they'd go into a cave, and it would be this amazing cave in fluorescent colors with all these wonderful things in it. So when I did this, which is all photographs of glass which have been collaged and then made and exposed, I just thought of those magical places that Rupert and his friends would find. So that's why it's called Rupert the Bear. This is the last one etching I did for a really long time, and it's called Predator, after the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. Okay, who's seen Predator? Okay. You know what's really cool about Predator? No, it's cool. Until the end, is that alien can actually camouflage right into the jungle. So just before the alien attacks, there's that whole shift in the jungle. Remember that? Okay, yeah. So when I did this part, right, I thought of like the alien shifting in the jungle. And that's why it's called Predator. And they really screwed it up at the end when they exposed the Martian. Well, they did. They totally screwed it up. Then I got the Nick Novak Scholarship. So I decided I'd go back and do some printmaking I hadn't done in a while. I took litho in second year, Ontario College of Art, so I thought, okay, I'll do some lithographs. Now, they didn't have workshops coming up at the time, so I spoke with the director, Robert Atomachuk, and I said, okay, Robert, can you just tell me how not to wreck anything? Okay? And I'll figure the rest out myself. So Robert accommodated the whole thing, bless his heart. He said, this is what you do, this is what's going to wreck the press, break the stone, etc. And with the help of people working in the litho area, they would give me tips on what to do, and they were constantly doing this. So I did litho from about late '88 to 1990. This one is called Death Goes Shopping. It's on a piece of, this is about 19 inches high. So this was black BFK, and I just kept on over-printing the white ink. And then this is what happens when a butterfly goes into outer space. Okay, this is a technical faux pas. This is the litho bar. And this is, you know what, I'm not good technically with the printmaking, okay? Honestly, I'm really bad. I just know how to work a fuck up. But technically, I'm hopeless. And this is the varicose veins for the butterfly. It would be like if you do a lot of retail work, you get varicose veins. It's true, you do. So this would be the equivalent of like mega retail, except the butterfly is going into outer space. You know, like this is what happens to a baby if you put it in a stiletto heel. It gets upset. And there was this method called a reversal, where you could take everything that hadn't been printed and reverse the stone. So the blue is there, courtesy of Heather Oakes. There were two people at Open Studio who knew how to do a reversal. So Heather said, "I'll do the reversal for you," and she did. And so that's that one. That's about 1989. This is called the tarsier. Now, we had, and we're going to get back to the Allery near the end of this lecture. We had this store in Queen West called the Allery, and they sold old prints from books, a lot of chromolithographs and engravings. And they had the ones that were in really good condition, and they were really pretty flowers and birds and nice things. And then they had the real sort of crappy ones that, had mold growing on them, and the drawing wasn't very good, and those you could get really cheap. So they had these little animal engravings, and they were about 4 inches high, and they were $2 each. So I started to buy them, and I decided to do lithos of them because I thought if I sort of replicated them, it would preserve the prints, it would preserve the animals. But also what I loved was just the wackiness of the drawing. Like, a lot of it didn't seem particularly accurate to the animal. So I ended up doing caricatures. These ended up being caricatures of old engravings. And this is from '89, and this is one of Bat's. I did about 7 of these things. Now, all of these things you're seeing are stone lithographs. And what was happening in the process is, how many people have done lithography? Okay, when you're drawing on the stone? And now a drawing teacher told, Richard Gorman was my first drawing teacher, and he put it beautifully. He said, when you're painting and the brush touches the surface, there's a little piece of energy. And so when you're drawing, there's a little piece of energy. And I found drawing on the stone, you'd grind it up really smooth, nice, smooth stone. It was totally sexy, that contact point. So the drawings started to get progressively more sustained because it felt really good, and I didn't want it to end, right? That is the only reason. That's the truth of it. It was like, oh, wow, yeah, the grease. Oh, let's just keep stroking that stone. And it's true, and it got to a point where I would shack up for the weekend. hours a day with a big old rock and a grease pencil, and just like, oh yeah, let's layer it, you know. Now, this one's from 1990, and I was going to have drawings of Victorian scraps up around the hands, and the whole thing was going to be inspired, excuse me, not expired, by Victorian scrapbooks, because I had a friend who had collected them. And the entire image changed. I know at one point Arno Maggs came in and he looked at these things and he said, Julie, there were pieces of shit in the air. You know, it's like, and also what happened is I didn't know it, but I didn't know it at the time because when I was drawing it, it was in reverse. And it was only when I printed it that I realized that it was an illustration of a nightmare I had. And I didn't know it until I printed it. Now, it didn't work, and it didn't work, and it didn't work until I whited out the thumb. And before I printed the white on the thumb, it wasn't clicking at all, and that's what it took to do that. And it's called Race Point, because we used to go to Race Point when we were kids. And I got pulled under at Race Point and spit out by the ocean. Oh, it was kind of neat, you know, it was really calm. It was like, oh man, it spit me. I was body surfing, and the wave took me under, and I'm like thinking, oh, I can't do anything. I'm a lousy swimmer, and it's the Atlantic Ocean. I thought, there's nothing you can do. And then I went, you need some air now. And I was really calm, because there was nothing I could do. And the ocean spit me out. You want to hear the rest of this story? Because it gets really funny. So I'm laying on the beach, and my bathing suit bottoms are still on. The top is pulled down around my waist. And I really don't care, because when you don't drown, you're in a good mood. You're in a really good mood. And so I don't know how long I was laying on the beach for, looking at the sky, grinning away. And this guy walks by and looks down at me, and I literally looked up to him and went, hi! And then he looked at me like I was completely off my nut, and he walked away. But that was Race Point. This is called green grapes. This is what happens if an insect lives in your grapes for long enough. It gets nice and big. Comes out at you. And this is the last one of this series. No, the second last. I did one in 1990. This is called Worker Foot. And my foot was hurting. And I didn't know why. And what I really like about the whole thing when you endeavor to make images is you can vent your superstitions through your imagery. So I thought that my foot's really hurting me, so I'll just make a diagram of it. So this is where it hurt. This is what it felt like. This was the basic area, right? And then for some reason it stopped hurting and everything was cool. And that's my foot. I looked down, I looked in a mirror and drew it on the stone. Now, what happened in 1991 was I got a Canada Council grant. I got a show of lithographs in Rome at the Canadian Cultural Centre, and I wrote the Canada Council and sent in the application and said, listen, I'm going over there, but can I stay? I'm there anyway. I might as well stay. And I proposed to do a series of lithographs based on the Italian experience. This was my first trip to Europe. I'm a bit of a late bloomer in the traveling department. And this trip changed everything, okay? It gave me 10 years worth of imagery. 4 months in Italy took care of the 90s. And no, honest to God. And I started doing watercolors. And I never thought I'd do watercolors. At the Ontario College of Art, the watercolor classes were usually uptight. You know, people were like stretching their paper, and pissing about with little brushes, and I thought, oh man, I'm never going to do this. And even when my mother, who is psychic, my psychic mother said, you will do watercolors. And I said, no, you're pretty accurate most of the time, but there's no fucking way I'm doing watercolors ever. Well, that's it. So when I was actually in Italy, this is what I did. I would do sketching in the morning, and they gave me a little studio at the Cultural Center, and these were 11 by 17 inches. So I would have about 3 of these books. Sorry, my nose is running. Please forgive this. I'm so sorry. And I'll wipe this afterwards, okay, I promise. And so what I would do is I would do my impressions of what I saw in these books in the afternoon, okay? And the thing that got me onto watercolors is the last month I was in Italy, I took a whole trip around Italy. I stayed in Rome for most of the trip. And I thought, keep it simple. Lead pencils, a sketchbook, an eraser, a pencil sharpener. After 2 weeks, I missed color so bad. I didn't care where I got my color. So I ran to the art supply store and bought a little tin of watercolors. And that's how I started getting into watercolor. The thing about watercolors is if you're staying in a pensione with 3 other people in the room, you would better be working in a charming medium. No, it's true. Like, you know, it's like people go, oh, watercolors, you're an artist. And it was great because people with, and again, it's the whole public work thing where you can't be too precious. You know, people, at one point, the only time I couldn't take it was when I had an entire neighborhood standing around a circle and I was on my hands and knees on a kitchen floor doing watercolors. And at that point, I couldn't handle it. I said, I'm so sorry, I can't do this. Now, when I got back from Italy, there were all sorts of things I started doing about Italy. I saw these things in Rome, but these aren't from Rome. I made them. Now, not in Rome, excuse me, in Naples. Now, what they had in Naples in all the apartment courtyards were these homemade altars. And they had modern light fixtures, bathroom and kitchen tiles, neon lights, right? So I started to see them everywhere, and I took photographs of them. And they had Christ, and then I called them burning martyrs, right? And I described them to my friend Lorna, who's Catholic, and she'd say no. She'd say, they are souls in purgatory, right? And then I would go on about the art in the churches, and I'd say, Lorna, I love the Catholic Church. There's such entertainment value. And she'd say, Julie, it's called spectacle, right? And also what was really amazing about the Marys and the Jesuses, as you got down into Naples, people would give Mary and Jesus jewelry, all right? So there was the classic thing where, sorry about this, Jesus is here and Mary's holding Jesus. There would be like, it was like bling, big, thick trails of gold going from Mary's arm to her other arm with Jesus there. And Jesus and Mary looked incredibly hot. I decided, I know this is really sacrilegious, and if anyone's Catholic in here, please forgive me, and you're allowed to slap me one in the kisser after this talk, but I decided that the Catholic Church was a big cock tease. Because Mary and Jesus, and Mary especially, like, all the Marys looked like movie stars. And I just sort of thought, okay, this is what you got. You got the virgin birth, and you got Mary looking incredibly hot. And I thought, no wonder everybody goes to church. And I went into a lot of churches. They were full of art, and there were churches where it was wonderful because people would interact. Like in the Sopra della Minerva, there was this showcase with a skeleton in recline, dressed up in a lovely dress, and to the side, people had given her mirrors. You know, if that sort of thing was great. Now these I made out of galvanized steel, cut flat. Then I molded them into these things and painted them with enamel. This is part of a collaborative showcase installation with Bridget Corkery. Bridget grew the fruit and arranged it. But she did something else. So envision this is one showcase. The other showcase, Bridget made a head out of burrs that had fake eyes and fake teeth. And then over the head, she got this massive zucchini that she hung in the showcase, and it went rotten in the showcase. And it was wonderful tension because it looked like it was going to explode at any minute. Like any minute, all right? And the other thing about making stuff is I wanted to buy the souls in purgatory I saw in Naples, but I knew I'd never find the shop, so I just thought, well, wait till you get home and make them. You know, so that's what I did. Now, this is the first gallery show after my first trip to Italy. This is a book by Jeannie Thibb. She included it here. Now, this was the first show where I couldn't afford to frame, so I was terrified I wouldn't sell anything because it wasn't framed. And this is when I came up with my game called Red Hot Productions. And this was going to be my really cheap artwork. Each of these prints was $40, unframed. And all the text on the frame is thanking people who helped me out, including the councils who gave me money. So this is the show. How's everybody doing here, by the way? Now this is a bit manic, but each one of these tacks, I not only color-coded them to the painting, I color-coded them to each corner of each painting. And this is a detail. I've always been fascinated by high heel shoes in disrepair. And we'll go through the show, and here it goes. And this is what it feels like when you're in a room full of cigarette smoke. Now, there was this little coffee shop called the Sax Disco. And it was the smallest disco in the world. And they would put pictures on top of your cappuccinos, and everybody was smoking. And this was just when they were starting to ban smoking in Ontario. And even though my eyeballs wanted to jump out of their sockets and run into the street screaming, I was so happy that people were smoking cigarettes without guilt. I stayed in the disco. And this is the show. And some of the stuff was very much influenced by Roman fresco painting and going into Pompeii. This is one of a number of pictures I've done about having no money. This is wallowing here. So it says, credit please. And it says, I want great, more, swank, gorgeous, fabulous, good times. With luck. At the bottom of it. And that's the end of that show. Now, I went back to Italy, and by this time I decided I was going to really do more watercolors. So every day I would do sketching, and then at night I'd do watercolors. And it was really great because I was staying in this nunnery in Venice. And the only place I could get to a sink was in the showers, so there'd be this table outside the showers, and then all of these other girls, because it was a nunnery, would be coming out and looking over at the paintings with wet hair from their showers, and like water would be dripping into the paintings, but it didn't matter. They were all very encouraging, right? So this is a wedding in Naples, and this is what happened. The road was less than 1 lane. And it had an entire wedding party, an entire street. It even had potted plants lining the less than 1 lane road that had ribbons around them. And suddenly in the middle of all this, there was this huge sort of hue of alarm in the crowd, right? And somebody had been run over. And I thought, holy Christ, it can't be the bride, right? And it ended up that someone's foot had gotten run over. And as soon as that happened, it was cool. They were carted off. The wedding resumed. So this is what I think your foot feels like after it's been run over by a car. So this is the wedding bouquet, and these are the wedding rings. And with this series of watercolors in Italy, I would just... whatever I saw in the day would manifest into slightly surrealistic watercolor or set of watercolors at night. This is a sketchbook thing. Heavy John Scott influence on this one. And I go in and out of keeping sketchbooks. Sometimes I keep them all the time. This is from about '93. These are from ancient Roman paintings. This is a modern ancient Roman girl doing her exercises. And she's modern because she has short hair. And this is a screen print. Another thing that the trip to Italy did is it got me back into screen printing. And the reason this happened, and there is absolutely no historic accuracy to this theory whatsoever. I'm in Pompeii, okay? And I'm in the Villa of the Mysteries. And they have the murals that obviously took a little more time. And then they had the fresco painting that was just faux finishes, like faux blocks of marble. And I kept on thinking, and you could tell by the way they were doing them that time was money, because if you had to paint that villa, you couldn't take forever. So, for instance, a marble block would be the following: modeled marble texture, a dark bottom right angle, a light top right angle. So there was this incredible shorthand. So I kept on thinking, you know, if the Romans had silkscreen technology, they just would have screen printed all the walls of the villas, right? So this got me into silk screening. This is another red hot product. Endless colors. This thing is probably about 6 inches high, and actually it's slightly autobiographical, not completely. Don't worry about the head, really. I used to like thunderstorms as a kid, and one evening a storm was coming in, and I actually thought I was about 9 years old at the time, and I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to pull the lightning out of the sky and sculpt it into drawings like neon lights? But I figured because it was lightning, they'd be really kinetic and they'd be moving. So that's a picture of me pulling the lightning down from the sky and trying to shape it into drawings. Now, I got a show at the Manitoba Printmakers Association in 1993 in Winnipeg. And one big thing came to mind. I thought, how am I going to ship everything? The big shocker when I shipped the show over to Rome, Italy, I had never, ever, ever spent that much money on my art career. Like, it cost me as much as it costed to rent my apartment for a month to ship the work. I was totally freaked out. I could not believe things would cost this much. So I swore at the next show that I would try and ship as cheaply as possible. So I decided to do installations and have them all in 5x5 or 7x9 inch modules. And this is when I started limiting the colors of my screen printing. Okay, so this is 3 colors, and this is 4 or 5. And it was funny because when I was doing these lithographs, I said to myself, you know the ones you saw before, right? I said to myself, maybe one day, if you work really hard, you'll be a real printer. And I think the reason I felt that way is, with printing in endless color, I figured I was using print matrices to paint with. So it was much better for my color. We're gonna be finished this one soon. So what I did was I decided that the installations would be made of little assemblages of these smaller prints. Now I did this right through the 90s. Ed Pien and Johannes Zitz collaborated with these, and I did a number of shows using these, and then with each show I would simply add to the inventory. So I would do new 5x5 inch images that were current to what I was thinking. Oh, Corey, do you need a chocolate? Okay. Now, what happened with the Manitoba Printmakers Association was they had a square gallery, and then they had a gallery with no running wall space. I thought, take the gallery with no running wall space. And so I treated these like tiles. These were private studios that people rented, so I just put like one initial from each of their names on the door. So they could say to their friends, well, you know, go to the door with the G and the C on it. So this is 1993. This is the first Red Hot boutique, because the whole idea is people could buy pieces of the installation for $5 and $9, and they could make their very own installations in their bathrooms, because these were all laminated. Now, I did another little installation in 1994, and these are each 7 by 9, and honestly, you know, like, I'm a single girl, and I go through these phases thinking I might meet somebody. So I was going through one of these phases thinking, man, what would happen if you met that special someone, that soulmate that would be with you for the rest of your life? And I thought, you know, if you were ever going to marry someone, it would be a really good idea if you just exchanged genitals for a day. I thought this could solve a lot of problems. And so, so at first I thought, okay, they would do a self-castration and just switch them up, right? And I thought, okay, first of all, it would be really, really messy. But I started to really think when I was making the image, because I thought, okay, they can't be horrified because that wrecks the ritual, okay? And I thought they sort of have to be up in the sky. So this isn't tethered to the mundane of every day, because then it's just, well, I don't know, it's not as good. I think if you're going to do a self-castration, you've got to be up in the clouds. And, well, no, it's true. And then I used these nice relaxing colors, and I made them look very serene. And this was part of this little tiny sorry, the slide is out of focus on this. I'm sorry. You know what, Chemi, you'll never get it back. Yeah, it's like, I decided to include this slide because it might be out of focus, but this is what happened. This is the installation. But that's the only one that's out of focus. Another sketchbook thing from '94. Sort of a mutant bird boy. Now, I decided to do a project, and I thought, wouldn't it be nice to go in, see a show, like the entire show, purchase the whole show, take it home under your armpit, and keep it in a single display unit at home. So I went to a place called Eldridge Box, and I told them my idea, and they figured out how to make the box. And this is how it works, right? It opens from the back, dum-da-dum, do-do-do. You pull out the pictures that are all like bound like a calendar, right? Pick the picture you like, dum-dum-dum-dum, and put it back in the beautiful faux frame home display unit. And so one of the projects that came out of this was the funky Econoline pack. So this is, I screen printed this. The boxes all came as flats. Do you want to hear the story of how these boxes came to be? This is like art money nightmare. I went to Eldridge Box. Now the first rendition of this was a collaborative project. So we'd all made multiples and we were selling them, and by the time we got the estimated $1,500 these boxes would cost, the price of paper had gone up, and the boxes were about $800 more than the stated price. So I thought, oh, Christ, I can't afford to do this project. What am I going to say to Jean Trendle, David Sylvester, Alan Flint, Carolyn Burks, Libby Haig, and Sharona Plakitas, that the project is over? I thought, oh, Christ, I can't do that. So I called the woman at the Eldridge Box Company, and I said, listen, I really want to get these boxes, but the price has really gone up, and this is the amount of money I have. I have $1,500. So she said, this is what we can do for you. She said, if we don't have a paper trail, I don't have to charge you tax, and we can bring the job in for $1,500. But this is what you have to do. You have to make the check to cash. I will meet you at a subway stop. I will meet you at a subway stop, right? You hand me the check, I'll deliver the boxes. At this point, I did not tell my other colleagues what the hell I was doing. So I'm at the subway stop, I hand her the check to cash, and I thought, they're going to kill you. They're all going to kill you. The boxes came through. But it was, handing over that check was absolutely freaking terrifying. So after I did the group project, I was really excited, so I just did a rendition of my own. And there's another little one. Now, again, this was silk screened. This was done on the Vandercook. Okay, this background is a zinc etching plate I put the texture on, and these are linoleum cuts. And then I got full-time into the watercolors, okay? And they were very much like the ones I did in Italy, in that at the end of every day, I would just do these watercolors about things I'd seen in the day. So here's the Easter Bunny. And he's looking really tired because he's got to do all the Easter eggs for millions of children. This is me as a man. And each piece of paper is about 8.5 by 10.5 inches. And again, I would just go home at night, and it was kind of, I would just do whatever was on my mind. This is called 2 a.m. These are from '95, by the way. And I was camping on Salt Springs at a place called Ruckles Farm. And I got up at 2 in the morning one night, and you know when the moon is incredibly bright? It's so bright and full, everything's silver. It's like high noon, but it's silver and it makes shadows. So this is a picture of the moon, and this is this night guy, he's kissing the moon. This is from 1996. And this is called About 17. And there was this fabulous girl in the cafe. And she was really, really voluptuous. And this is where, if you're really, really voluptuous and your bra's too small, it kind of clinches into your bosom and does that. And she was so wonderful and so proud. And she was flirting like mad with this boy. And she was doing an extremely good job of it. And it was like, I just looked at her for a half minute and smiled at her like, go for it, honey. And she just looked and gave me the smile. I was like, woo! So this is a picture of her. This is her serving her coffee. She was so wonderful. And then I did a series of pictures about Christmas, because I really like I really like Christmas, and this is what happens to children when they're bad. Here is Santa's primate hench ape force-feeding coal. Now, I wanted to represent men and women in this, but I was running out of room on the page, so I thought, okay, you got to combine the two. So, to make sure everybody knew that it was a guy and a woman in the same body, he had to have an erection. And I know, okay, so, and it looks like he's having an erection because some mean-ass primate is shoving coal down his throat. But that's what happens when you're bad. I know in our society, we think children can get away, and this would be cruel. But obviously, this girl-boy's character is being built. And this is one of the few images that came straight out of a cleaning job. Some people have suggested that I use my cleaning job as fodder for imagery. The problem with that is people really trust you when you clean their houses. So you have to be careful you don't commodify their privacy. Now in this case, Sarah would have been about 5, and Stephen, that's Stephen, he was a new baby in the house. And I came down the stairs one day, and there's Sarah holding her little brother. And Sarah's the oldest. She was the oldest. She had her sister is named Frances. And I swear to God, it was all there. Because when people are the oldest, they're kind of given the task of taking care of things, but they also take it on. And it was her. She'd taken on the whole thing. The entire house could have collapsed around Sarah and Stephen, and she would not have let go of that kid. And I actually said to the client, by the way, I did a watercolor inspired by this, and if you want to see it, I'll show it to you, and if you want me to give it to you, I'll give it to you, to protect her privacy. But it was this, and I mean, these are the kind of angels taking care of the baby. I don't know, this is really crazy, because when this little baby Stephen, like I saw him from the time he was just born, and you got the sense that there was something in the air looking after the baby. Maybe it's just me being superstitious. But those are the things guarding Stephen, and then Sarah's looking after him. But it was, the strength of this kid was amazing. It was just, and it was 30 seconds at the bottom of a stairway. Now, I was given a show at the Art Gallery in Mississauga in 1996. So it was that whole thing of how we have to promote ourselves. And sometimes it just feels like so horrible and boring, and you don't want to do it. So I thought, I need a spokesperson. So I decided my spokesperson would be Captain Babe. Now this was the first logo of Red Hot Productions. That's the she-wolf. You don't see the whole thing, but it was actually a she-wolf with a stick of lit TNT in her mouth. So that's the captain going, my name isn't Babe, it's Captain Babe. And people who know her really well call her Captain. And so she was on faxes I sent about the show. She was the total spokesperson. Now, I was still working with these little laminate screen prints, and at the time I was going to be 39 years old, right? And I was thinking, oh my God, you're hitting middle age, and I started to think of all the things I should have by the time I was 40. So I thought in terms of things like being more stable economically, a whole set of dishes that matched. Really nice sheets, more than one set, all that stuff. And I started to think, you can't bloody well do an entire show about what you want when you're 40. Who the hell's going to be interested in that? I thought, you're not Elizabeth Taylor. And this is the whole thing, and I think it's really important. There's private aspects of your practice. You're working in the studio, you can do anything you want, but what do you let out? What do you don't let out? When you go public, people are going to look at it, and sometimes I think, like, you know, I don't want to waste their time, because frankly, nobody is going to give two shits in the wind that you want matching dishes when you're in your 40s. So what I decided to do was ask other people. What did they want when they were 50? I said, what do you want when you're 50, and what did you want when you were 50? So I asked 70 people and made 70 illustrations of what they wanted. Now, Frances was 3. So I said to her, what do you want when you're big, like your mom and your dad? Because 50 wasn't a figure. And she looked at me and she said, clear as a bell, I want a different supper. Which is like, was just what you want for the rest of your life, right? I was like, oh my God, is this ever dead on? And these, again, are 5 by 5 inches. And then Vanessa was 14, and she wanted to change history. Again, I asked a lot of my clients this question, and they were totally game to play. And then I made these assemblages for age groups. And at the side of each assemblage, there was a ledger. And so this whole thing was a whole amalgamation of these images I'd started in 1993. And I just added more to the inventory. This is the second Red Hot boutique. And it was sort of like consumers distributing. where you could order your item and buy it. And again, at the opening, people liked parts of the installation, so they bought things off the wall, so I had to go back into inventory and replace them. And this is one of the assemblages. And this is what it looked like up close. And then this is a close-up of the boutique. So what was really fun is I silk-screened everything. There's fabric behind this. I silk-screened the fabric, all the signs. These are books I made. And so that was 1996. This was the shopping bag of Captain Babe going out on a date. And the thing about, I love silk screening because you can do it on any surface, so you can become this one-person factory for everything. This is some Red Hot product. This is the Honey It's Fabulous screen-printed costume jewelry. And what's next here? And this is, we're into 96. Paul Petro and I came up with the idea of the micro boutique. And this is totally on the honor system that people could just drop money in and take the product. Now, these things were called repeller jerks. And this is the repeller jerk, and it's really, really cute on one side, but on the other side is a combination of two of the worst colors in the world, taupe nylon and raw magenta. So the idea is you would wear your really cute pendant out, and then if a jerk started to bother you, you would simply flip it around and scare the jerk away with bad color. And that was the repeller jerk. And of course, there's Captain Babe, there. And in 1987, this was cooked up by Paul Petro and David Liss and myself. And this was at the Sadie Bronfman Center in Montreal. And I was the human boutique. And all of these things, these are photocopies on pieces of colored paper. These are colored photocopies, and these are simply laminated and all these are laminated, and these are laminated photocopies that I tied into little cylinders. And what really inspired these was children's toilet paper tube art. Because what happens is when you, at the clients' houses, when the kids are in kindergarten, they make things out of toilet paper tubes. And I always loved them so much, all these things that the kids would make. So what happened with this gig was I took a morning train to Montreal, had all of this stuff ready to assembled the outfit during, the hat, during the afternoon, which is sequins and photocopies and colored paper, then did the gig at the opening at night. Now, I made this too tight, and it really started to hurt, so I just got drunk. I got drunk because it really hurt. And then I went home, and I took a midnight bus home. And when I did this, I thought, man, there's some Sandra Meigs from the 1980s. So it says, thanks, Sandra Meigs. I have a policy in the work is if I think there's an overt influence in the work, either the name has to be in initials on the work, or I have to put the person's name in the title. So some work is titled if, for instance, if somebody is inputted in process, I'll make sure their name is in the title. And so it's this whole idea where you're trying to sleep on the bus, so you're kind of contorted, and you don't want to go to the front of the bus, because at 2 in the morning, humans aren't driving the bus anymore. They're not. That you know. And this is something else from 1987. It's called Beyond Credit. This is another time, this is a story of my life. It's mismanagement, folks. I was broke again. And there was that whole thing of the wolf at the door, right? And I'm sitting there and I'm going, the wolf is not at your door. The wolf is tonguing it up the inside of your goddamn leg. So here's the wolf. And Now, again, when I was making this image, I thought, you know what? You can't have explicit sex. That doesn't do anything, because this is such a familiar feeling. So I thought, do it after sex, right? Because the wolf's been around a lot. Everybody's familiar. They're very comfortable with one another. And so that's what I did. And the wolf works out. Very important. This is called Pussy in Heaven. And again, these are based on things that I was either feeling at the time or what happened during the day. And you want to hear the story to this? How's everybody doing? You guys have been so great keeping up with this. I'm walking down Dover Court. It's the evening. It's a 2-lane road. My friend Andrew Harwood is in the middle of the traffic, directing the traffic away from a cat that has been run over. Andrew owns cats, okay? So he doesn't want the cat to be obliterated all over the road. So I'm watching Andrew do this, and I'm thinking, you know what? At one point, this cat's going to be smeared all over Dover Court, and Andrew cannot see this. So I went up to Andrew and I said, Andrew, we can go now. I said, you have given the cat's soul enough time to leave its body. I said, it's cool. The cat's soul is in heaven now. Let's go. So I just let him out, and I thought I would do a picture of the cat in heaven thanking Andrew. So it was a gray cat, and this is based on an installation called Wieners and Mops that Andrew Harwood did in a window, and this is the grave of the cat with the wieners hanging off it. No, seriously, I had to get Andrew out of there. And as soon as he was told that the cat's soul had left its body, he was cool. He knew he'd helped the cat. Now, in 1997, I thought it was time to do some more promotion. And I thought, oh my God, not again. I'm going to be sending out slides, and people will be stuck with having to send them back. And it was just so horrifying. So I thought, okay, just do some screen prints, send them the artwork. So I started a mail art project. And what I did was I got friends of mine to give me addresses, and on the envelopes it said hello from, and then whoever gave the address. So for instance, my friend Stephen gave me 3 addresses. So the envelope said hello from Stephen, so that people getting the art would know who'd given out their address. So it wasn't coming out of the blue. I started out doing about 160. I did this for 5 years. I ended up sending 200 things 4 times a year. And they were all screen printed. This is from I started to do a series of little books where all the flats were 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper. This is each side of a flat for a book called Pocket Utopia. These were done on the Vandercook. And then there was a show called Offset at the showcases at Harborfront Center. So I kept on thinking of the really boring merchandise that galleries have for blockbuster shows. And I thought, you know, they have mugs. They should have fancy teacups with gold gilt and stuff. So I thought I would do women's accessories using my imagery. So I got little jewelry making things, and these are laminated. These are actually from extra flats I had. These are photocopies that were blown up and laminated and made into a purse, and these were transferred. So I made all the displays with my really bad carpentry and made little bits of jewelry. These are studs that were put in the laminates. You know, I love crafts. And this is for 3 things. This is a character called the Gnat Devil. And Ed Pean suggested we do work about hell, right? So I started to think of the world I lived in, and I thought, okay, you're not in the middle of a war zone. Even when you're broke, you can eat. You have friends. You have something you like to do. You have a family. I thought, when it comes right down to it, you really have no idea of hell. But constantly, there are all these things that we're supposed to be. There's the whole idea of stress and being stressed out. And so I thought instead of doing something about hell, I came up with the Nat Devil for pet peeves. So what I did was I got these buttons made, and I would ask people what pissed them off. And if they told me something, they got a button. Now, what was really good is if people were slightly wrecked, then they gave you great lists of things that pissed them off. And I ended up making a book, and I got a jury to pick the top 10 Nat Devils. And one girl who was about 8, I said, "What really bothers you?" And she looked at me and she said, "My friend who bites me." I thought, yeah, that'll do it. At the time, I found out about artist trading cards through the new gallery in Calgary. And I don't know whether this project's still going, but there was a whole worldwide artist trading card thing that was started by M. Vancy Sterneman. And he also had a thing called Copy Left, where if you sent him 20 trading cards, he would send you back a card pack of 15 cards that other people had made. So this all sort of segued into mail art. There was also a mail art booklet put together by Pascal Lemoire in France. He stopped that at the beginning of the millennium, maybe 2002. But you send him 60 things and you get a book back, a Xerox-bound book full of work from other artists. So, and this is photocopies. You know what's really great? That laser paper you can get at the Business Depot. So if you're ever doing printing, you know what? You get a lot of the work done for you if you just do it on top of this paper. And this is just photocopies and watercolor. Now, there was a site-specific project in Barrie called Taking It to the Streets. And we got to do things in stores. So I got North County books, the window. So I thought, okay, what are you going to do? And again, this is the whole idea of requirements of sight. I thought, this is a guy trying to run a business. So you can't do something that's going to alienate customers because it's his livelihood. So I thought, okay, people like babies, and they like babies when babies like them. So each baby, this says, "You're beautiful." The other baby had a sign saying, "You're the best." And this baby at the back had a sign saying, "You're brilliant." These are screen prints on foam core. And they were done in sections. This whole baby is about 6 foot tall. And there's an EP on here somewhere because I thought, gee, this kind of looks like Ed Pean, right? So I gave him his credit. Now, after I got these back from North County Books, I thought, oh no, you got to store these goddamn things now. So I thought, you know what, you've got the exposure matrices. You can print up hundreds of babies if you want to. So the Grange Park behind the Ontario College of Art, I decided to put them up there. Now, luckily, I put them up on a Saturday morning, okay? And they stayed up all weekend, and by Sunday they were kind of wrecked. And then Monday morning I went to take them down, and the city had done it for me and trashed them. So I thought, okay, next time you do this guerrilla stuff, don't do it on a weekday. Do it on a Saturday morning. And there was just the little pink ribbons hanging from the tree. And I put an outgoing saying, you know, I've got 3 babies hanging off a tree in Grange Park. So that's what I did then. At that point in '97, I decided to go back to abstraction, and I did this in a sketchbook. Now, I started doing lead and colored pencil abstracts, and they looked deader than doorknobs. And so I was visiting Alan Flint in Hamilton, and he suggested I do the abstracts in print. And I took a break and did more artist trading cards. And so it's Captain Babe and the Easter Bunny. And this is poor Ms. Drip and poor Mr. Drip. And, of course, this is Good Girl and Great Guy. They're the bad ones. And this is what they're really like, coming out of their ears. And, again, this is photocopies with watercolor on it. I love photocopies. They're so great. You push a button, you get a print. Here, whoops. 1998, this is Mr. Teddy. This is another foray into toy making. And he's about 10 inches high. And when I was doing the embroidery here, I was watching The Fantastic Voyage. Who has seen The Fantastic Voyage? Okay, you guys, you gotta see The Fantastic Voyage. You know what it's about? All these people are shrunk down really small, like subatomic size, and they're put in this little tiny spaceship, and they're injected into the human body because they have to get into the brain of a super spy to get something out of the brain, and I forgot what it was. But when the beginning of the film, they go through the bloodstream, and the whole thing is animated, and it's absolutely beautiful. So as I was watching the movie, I was doing the embroidery. So this is what happened with Mr. Teddy. You make a teddy bear, and you can't sell the thing for the same price as a piece of artwork because it's just a teddy bear, right? And it's like you're not a real, like it's not like I'm Jeff Koons making a teddy bear, it's. So this is what Paul Petro and I did. We sold raffle tickets for the bear. The raffle tickets were $2 each, with a picture of Mr. Teddy saying, "I will love you." They were sold as signed multiples, and we sold enough raffle tickets to come to about $800. Mr. Teddy was exhibited in Montreal, and there was even a raffle box of photocopies and glitter, and so that's how we sold Mr. Teddy. This is one of the last watercolors I did. It was a self-portrait, and underneath this is all the stuff I owned. And for some reason, I felt like covering it up with brown dirt and festooning it with stones. And it was really weird because it's that whole thing when you do imagery, and it's the whole what-if question. And I started to cover things up, and it's like, no, you can't cover your favorite shoe. That's my favorite shoe. This is another sketchbook thing. This is the ice storm of 1998. And this house is upset because trees have collapsed on the top of it. Was anybody in Montreal at that point? Were you in Montreal? Wow. Wasn't it? It was insane. This is the last installation of the 5x5s, and this was a show on aging. And at this point, I was really starting to get more and more into the abstraction. So these were thank you cards. So the reverse would be thanks for the treats. One was thanks for your stories, thanks for your grit, thanks for this life, thanks for this world. And this is what this looked like. And wow, I'd say that was about 15 feet across. And I think I pretty much used all that up. So that was 1999, and it was the last one. And there's a detail. And this is the last watercolor I did of the whole watercolor series. This side was my messy apartment. That's me in my messy apartment. And then the other side was Daytona Beach. And it started out as two images, but I was oscillating between them so quickly that I decided it was really one image. And they had these poor hermit crabs in shops at the mall, and people had taken their shells and used epoxy and like epoxied plastic pig noses and eyes and ears. And so the poor things were being poisoned to death. So, I mean, you can never let them go on the beach like that because their other hermit crab friends wouldn't play with them, but you know, I just, in the image, I let him go on the beach. His shell looks like some kind of toque. It wasn't very well done. This is Gallery Largeness, and Louis Jacob put them together. And the gallery was this small box. So this is a collaboration with Glenn Gear, and this was all about sea monsters. And what I did was I did the lining of the box. And it's silkscreen on a box flat. So to come up with the image, I just did a paper mock-up of the box and played with it and drew, and then played with it just to see how it would open. This is another toy. Now, I spent about a year on and off beating this doll, which, by the way, is only about this high. And I thought, oh my God, you can't try and sell this thing. So I did a direct photocopy of it at 75%, used it in a mail art project, and gave it to my friend Anne for Christmas. So I made about 20 of these, and the whole idea was to pass it on. To just, you know, like a waiter or the garbage collector or someone you'd see every day and maybe not necessarily talk to, but they're part of your existence because you see them every day. This is the first abstract that turned out in the year 2000. And these are all approximately 10 by 14 inches. And this is all done old-fashioned paste up. So what I did was to make the exposure matrices, I did Xeroxes of dot screens, pasted them with glue sticks on paper, re-photocopied them so there'd be no cut lines, and then did the ink drawing. Now this whole body of work had to be done in these three colors, in combination of all three, or a combination of two of each. Each print had to be resolved in no more than 3 runs. I could resolve them in 2 if I wanted to. And they started out looking really comic strippy. This was inspired by rocks and cement I saw going up Bathurst. And this is from 2000. I don't know where this came from. I still don't know where it came from. Yeah, and this is some more mail art. It was in an exhibition called Friendly Fire. I was going to do the whole abstract series in pistachio and magenta and black, but I realized a whole show of it would probably give people migraines. So I thought I'd go for the sympathetic colors of blue and orange and black. Now, this is a multiple I did. Emily Vay Duke and Cooper Battersby did a multiple of note paper saying maybe the depression will lift. The instruction was you could only use it in the spring. So I said, listen, do you mind if I do a little mail art project with this? And they said, no problem. So I took my favorite moment in the morning, and with just pen and writing ink, I wrote 31 letters, exactly the same text. But what would happen is things would screw up at different points. So each letter had different areas where I'd mess up the writing and have to cross it out. It's really messy up here because I tried to do circle template work with dipping pen and ink. So the ink leaked under everything. And so the thing I love about mail art is you can do these sorts of experiments, and they're really personal. I had a deck garden, and I'd have coffee, and the bumblebees would come into the morning glories. I actually did like that part of the day. So for my own archives, I send things to myself. This is from 2001. And this is just frost on the window at about 2 in the morning when I'd wake up at night. I kept on wondering where I'd used these 3 colors before. And I did some work in my dad's graphic company when I was a teenager. I was like The Apprentice. It was all the Joe jobs. And one of the first jobs I got was I had to lay letraset. How many people have used letraset? Okay, letraset. Yeah, I had to lay the same letter set on the same color crash cardboard for like 3 weeks running. And it was 36-point Helvetica black on 16 by 20-inch Peterborough Pacific blue crash. One day I got to use orange with black letter set. It was a revelation. This is another piece of mail art from 2002, a little postcard. And again, silk screening is so handy. When I got to the 5th anniversary of the mail art project, I decided to send everybody a thank you. So the way I tallied it up was each initial is each recipient and their country. And whoever got the piece of mail, I would just stamp their name. So, you know, this is you. And then this folds, so when it's not folded, they're apart. When it's folded, they're kissing. Now, this is an abstract from 2002, and I had a framing dilemma. I had a one-person show and a group show. Now, I got $1,000 in exhibition assistance, but to frame it straight, that wasn't enough money. So I thought, you have to come up with a presentation system. And so what I did was I silk screened a cartoon of a frame on mat board. Then Fernanda did a window cut on the mat, and then I literally assembled everything together with glue. So this is glued on, the print's glued on, and then I drilled little holes through the paper, and it took 12 nails to put each one on the wall. So what I did was I warned galleries. I'd say, 240 nails will be going into your wall. Is this okay? I thought I should warn them about it. This is from 2002. It's called Since June. My apartment has no air conditioning, and it gets so hot in the summer that the dishes feel warm, the face cream starts melting. So it was just being really hot in your apartment. This is called Blob. This is a little one. This is only 5.5 by 7.5. And what happened is I started getting a lot of mail art back. And so they would ask you to do things, and it started to feel like busy work. So I would come up with a little cartoon, and then everything I sent back would have the cartoon. So if they wanted me to do a collage, I'd use the silkscreen of the cartoon in the collage. And they were called the Lovely Wads. And every time, and inside the envelope, there was a list of everybody who got one of these. So that was actually mapping this floating mail art community at the time. And this is from 2003. And what you're going to see in this series is they get more and more dotty. I ended up doing 32 screen prints. Now, in about 2003, I decided to take everything out of the silk screen prints I thought was a crutch, right? I thought, okay, you do a lot of high contrast versus dots. You're doing a lot of cartoon outlining. And I said to myself, take everything out and do a print. So I ended up with the most generic image in the entire face of the earth. And then I thought, fine, build from there. And it really helped because I got this one shortly after. Now also, there's a lot of fun things you can do with photocopiers. You can photocopy on top of photocopies. Have you ever done that? Do a photocopy, feed it back through with a new image, photocopy on top of it. I try to do it quickly at the Kinko's because I'm worried that if they catch me, they'll tell me to stop because I might wreck the photocopier. In 2003, I decided to go back and do some figurative etching. This thing is about 6 inches long. And it's just straight up still life. This is 2 sides of a postcard I made at a residency at St. Mike's Print Shop in Newfoundland. And these are just these are just the rocks. And there's actually a place outside of St. John's called Paradise. So we sent them out of that post office. So they're postcard size. And it was really fun to just send the etchings in the mail with no protection either. It's amazing. Things are really well treated in the mail. This is another still life from 2003. And when I was at the residency at St. Mike's, I decided to do a collaborative mail art project in an edition of 12. So what I did was, I did an etching, you can't see it there, but I made these boxes out of old boxes, and there's that really hard bread, and there's a mint, and there's sage, and what I said to people is, anything you want to throw in these boxes, do it, and I'll send them out to 12 people. So I kept the 12 boxes out and open, and people just threw things in the boxes, and they were sent out. This is a screen print and drawing. This is nothing but an exercise, okay? I thought, this is from a sketch in a sketchbook, and I said, can you do a screen print of this, right? So I screen printed the lines, and this is a duotone. You know how you can use photocopies for a drawing and get a duotone? Does anybody know? It's really easy. You do one at the average setting, and you get the whole image, right? Then you put the next setting down to real light, like the lightest setting, and only the darkest part of your drawings are going to photocopy. And just with the press of 2 buttons, you can get a duotone. You can get the matrices you need for a duotone. And then I made a number of these, and then I added some drawings to them. It was just an exercise in printing and drawing. This is a screen print from 2004. The other thing when I was making this series is I wanted to get the sense they were arcing and traveling somewhere, so I didn't want to stick to the thing that was successful. This is called My Darlin', because I actually really loved going to Newfoundland, and when I did this, it reminded me of the cliffs around St. John's. But that came in the back door. This is called 3 Hours in London, and this came in through the back door too. I was in I think it was the National Gallery in London, and they had this whole medieval section, right? And it was only after I did this that I realized that this was almost an abstraction of all these medieval paintings I saw. Now, this was a project for Kiss Machine, and they wanted to do an artist project, so I said, can I do the cover? Now, this is a collaboration between me and the designer whose name was Mob. So what Mob did is he did all the topography, and then what he did was he put in some dots, and those were printed offset, and then we pulled a 2-color silk screen on top of it. The addition on this was 760. It took 8 hours to do each color. And that was, and then what also happened was in 2004, a friend gave me a moleskin sketchbook. So for 2 years, I did just drawing stuff outside. I kept it to 4 magic markers. They were brush markers. And again, it's going back to doing your exercises. And I find it really helps if I have to draw from observation. This was at Richmond and Spadina. And I would take about an hour a day, and I'd set it aside, and I'd do something on the outside. This is a mail art project from Holland. You had to do something about life, so I did some flowers. This is one of the last abstracts. And at this point, I was essentially, my instrument was the photocopier. All of these patterns are photocopies on top of photocopies. And before I finished the project, I had to make black and orange work, because every time I did it before, it would look like Halloween or harvest. So I think I got out of harvest with this. No, it's like, no, not harvest, please. This is from 2005, and it's called Plane. I really insist on looking out the windows when I'm in airplanes, and I get really pissed off when people want to shut the windows to watch movies. No, I really, really do. You know what was so cool about going up to the Eiffel Tower? The fact that you tried to imagine what it would have been like for someone in the late 1800s to be up that high. Like, what would it have been like if you'd never been beyond 3 stories and suddenly you were up on top of the Eiffel Tower? Like, could you imagine what that would have been like? So whenever I'm in a plane, that's what I think of. Oh, sorry. That's the last abstract of the whole series. Nothing but dots. This is more sketchbook stuff. We're almost done, you know. That's the Chester subway stop. Oh, I did some collaborative etchings. And this is with Johannes Zitz and Patrick DaCosta. And Johannes does a lot of performance, and his performance involves nudity. So Johannes said he needed some models for reference. And I said, so Johannes, you want us to take off our clothes? And he said yes. So I'm thinking, okay, fine. I've got to set boundaries here. So I've got 2 guys in my apartment, and I'm in there, and we all have nothing on. So I thought, that's cool. So I got Patrick on the phone, and I said, I have one thing I won't do. I will not spread my legs. And he said, fine. So the game was this. There was one Polaroid, and we took turns holding the Polaroid, and whoever had the Polaroid had to tell the other 2 what to do, and we had to do it. Don't worry, folks, it was good, clean fun. And I got 2 pictures of really cute nude men, so hey, nice. And so we took all the reference photographs and did a drawing on an etching plate together. Whoa. And this is Fiona Smith, Karen Azule, and myself. And the way I did this was I would have people to my apartment and get a nice bottle of wine and make sure nice snacks were provided. And so we could just sit and talk. And we always, when things worked out, we sat and talked for a couple of hours and had a nice supper and decompressed into the situation and then did the image. Now this is up to 2006, back to the exercises. You know what? This is nothing more than an academic exercise, okay? Nothing more, nothing less. I would never show these in a gallery, okay? But I decided I had to do my exercises. So this is the good old, cylinder, cone, sphere, box exercises, but it's toilet paper rolls, a styrofoam ball, a pencil box, and I made this out of paper. And I did about 20 of those. I got to teach a course in lino cutting, so I had to relearn how to lino cut. I leveled with George Hawk, and I said, George, I haven't done a lino cut since 1999. He said, that's okay. I said, okay. So these are Christmas cards, 2 of them, and there's Jesus. And he knows. He knows he's going to get crucified. And the JHVI, the J and the V is me. The H and the I is an artist in Toronto. Her name is Isabelle Amard. And she got credit because this is how Isabelle would do a star. So she got in there, so she got her credit. And this was an angel. And when I was in Lethbridge, Alberta, I was going to a coffee shop, and this girl called Joy came up to me. And Joy probably would have been in her late 20s, but had the disposition of a 9-year-old girl. And she started to tell me that she had a feather pillow and she loved it. She said she loved her feather pillow just like a child. And she looked at me and she said, "Is that weird?" And I actually thought, no, it's not weird. I mean, what the hell, you know? And I kept on thinking of, say, CEOs and businesses, and they have a lot of pressure from the job, and they're going through counseling, and the counselor says, "You know what? You've got to pick a familiar object and love it," you know? So I thought, this makes huge sense. So when I thought of an angel for Christmas, I actually thought of the feather pillow that Joy loved as much as she loved a child. This is just, when I do the odd bit of teaching, and whenever I teach, which is why I'd never take more than one course a semester, I tell myself I have to do every assignment I give the students to do. It's the only way I can mark and not feel like a complete toolhead. So this is the assignment. This was an assignment I'd given to the students to just do. Now, what happened was, I started getting interested in the idea of old engravings and printmaking again. So I took a print by Manuel Manila, and I did a collage of it and turned it into a lino cut. And this is from 2006. And then what I started doing was I started doing collages and ink studies of the collages. And I'm finding that if I don't do the ink studies, the lino cutting doesn't work. This is another ink study. This is a lino block from an old engraving, specifically a Piranesi. But what I like to do is I like to collage them first. This is a piece of mail art using the old still life thing. And these are the edges of a paper doily. And this was a print for a group show about the spring, and it's called hydroponics. So this is a two-tongued entity where the tongues are turning into flowers that have been knocked up. And this is lino cut on the insides of a doily. Now what I did was, you don't see it because the photography is really good, is I stapled a piece of acetate over it and backed it, so everything was stapled together. I did about 60 of those. This is from last year. This is another lino cut. This is called Signal Hill ? Because again, I collaged this out of Xeroxes of reproductions of Piranesi engravings from a book. And when I finished it, I thought, boy, this reminds me of Signal Hill. Whoops. And this is another one. I know, it looks really Led Zeppelin-esque. It does. I first did it. I couldn't stand it. At first I thought, Christ, this looks like this is a t-shirt they would have sold on Yonge Street in 1975. And this is another one. Now these images are really little. They're about 10 3/4 inches, the images themselves, by 8 1/4. This is a mock-up for a sign I did for the Tom Thompson. And this was really, really fun because it was one of those signs where you slap the letters in. So the interesting thing was, you know how you have to write to a word count? What's really fun is trying to write to a letter count. And so what we ended up doing, because it would have been too expensive to manufacture the signs, is they ended up being totally homemade. It took 10 photocopies on acetate to make the width needed for the sign. And so what I did was I photocopied on acetate, registered each of the 10 letters together, and then stapled them. So it was total homemade signage. This is a postering project, and it's photocopies and watercolors. So that's just a couple of human snakes really liking each other. We're almost done. This is a mock-up for a sign project that was up at Harborfront for the months of December and January. They were 70 by 90 inches long. Now, with Harborfront in Toronto, you have the Gardiner Expressway going out of the city. And so I thought of the idea of going home and thinking of home. And I was really into writing to the letter count at this point. So I wrote to a letter count. And this is for the children, you know, because I thought there's all these festivals going on, so I wanted to do a sign that children would like. And this ended up being completely solid. So this was on the east entrance, and then on the west entrance, because you'd go through a little hallway between them, I decided to just put home. There's another lino cut. This is a little piece of mail art where I did the lino cut was the lining of the envelope. Then I did a photocopy in reverse, and that turned into the outside of the envelope. This is from 2007. There's 4 runs and 13 colors in this. And I've put a 4-run limit on this work. Oh no, this is from 2008, and so was the other one. So this is a 2008 one. And guess what? It's the end. It's over. Thanks for sticking around.